The case of Romina Nunes several years ago literally shocked the whole of Spain with its unimaginable cruelty and cynicism. The very situation in which this unfortunate young woman found herself, we can say typical. Her husband beat her, and she kept silent, hoping that he would change. However, the denouement of this story shocked even experienced investigators who have seen everything in their practice. The victim's body was never found, only a fragment of it, which the sea threw ashore. But how did it happen? And could the tragedy have been avoided? To answer these questions, you need to understand who Romina was and why she never dared to admit to anyone in what trouble she found herself. Who is Romina Nunes? Romina Celeste Nunes Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in the city of Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and was the eldest of 2 daughters in a poor working-class family. Parents separated when the girls were still young, so their mother, whose name was Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise the children on her own. The woman had to work several jobs at once because her ex-husband did not help them financially at all and did not show any interest in the fate of the daughters. When she was still a schoolgirl, Romina got a job in order to help her mother and younger sister somehow. At the age of 17, the girl began a romantic relationship with a guy whose name was Christopher. He wooed her beautifully. They made plans for a joint future. But happiness ended as soon as Nunes learned that she was expecting a child and reported this to her lover. The young man immediately gave the chosen one an ultimatum. Either she terminates the pregnancy or they part forever. Romina deeply hurt the words of her lover, but after consulting with her parents, with whom she has always been very close, the girl decided to keep the child. Most of all, she feared that having had an abortion at such a young age will never be able to become a mother again, so there was only one way out. Christopher kept his word. He broke off all relations with the girl and was never interested in her fate and the fate of his child. Romina, at the age of 18, gave birth to a son whom she named Lucas. However, with the advent of a baby in the family and so deplorable financial situation worsened even more, money is catastrophically lacking. And mother Romina had to now support and grandson moving to Spain. Romina, depressed by the situation, she wanted to somehow correct the situation and help her family, but find a decent job with good pay in Paraguay. She still could not manage. Then the girl called her maternal aunt who lived in sunny Spain, and the relative invited her niece to her place, assuring her that it would be easier for her to settle down here and that there were more prospects in Europe than in Latin America. Not thinking long, the girl packed only the most necessary things, and having earned an airplane ticket to Spain, went on the road. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister for a while, deciding that she would pick him up as soon as she found a new place to live and a stable job. In the late summer of 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and from there traveled to its suburbs, the provincial town of Alcobendas, where she settled in the house of her aunt. Romina immediately actively began to look for work, and she smiled at her luck. Attractive and sociable beauty got a job as an administrator in a hotel where she received a decent salary. Part of the money she sent home and for the rest rented a separate apartment so as not to embarrass hospitable relatives. Soon, Nunes met a man named Javier with whom she had a stormy romance. The favorite a few years ago, just like her, emigrated to Europe in search of happiness and a better life. He was a native of the Republic of El Salvador, worked in construction, and seemed to be a serious man. However, when the girl became pregnant, the situation repeated itself. Javier was not ready for the appearance of children, but nevertheless, the couple tried to live together for a while. Unfortunately, soon after the birth of their common son, they finally broke up. The girl was again in a difficult situation because she was in a foreign country with an infant in her arms and simply did not know how to be further. For a while, she returned to her aunt's house where she was accepted and helped in every way possible. When the boy was only about 6 months old, the young mother went back to work because she could not work. But a few months later, a new shock awaited the girl. For a long time, she ignored the poor health and weakness, writing it off to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina still went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with cancer. The young woman underwent several courses of chemotherapy, lost her hair, lost a lot of weight, but overcame the insidious disease. After treatment, the girl quickly recovered. She continued to work and hid the lack of hair with the help of wigs. Romina believed that the hard trials, which she managed to steadfastly overcome, will certainly be followed by a period of happiness. She saved money and planned to take not only her eldest son, but also her mother and sister to Spain. New lover. In the summer of 2017, at an event where Nunes went in the company of friends, she accidentally met a man named Raul Diaz-Chicon. He was good-looking, able to impress others, had a serious job, and was financially secure. He liked the smiling beauty, and he became interested in her, asking mutual acquaintances. Romina also liked the statuesque beauty, and when he soon asked her out on a date, she gladly agreed. Raul was almost 15 years older than Romina, and he worked as a leading process engineer for a large energy company. He had a couple of failed marriages under his belt and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships. But the girl was not intimidated by the age difference at all. As for her personal life, she had a similar situation, with the only difference being that she was raising sons from 2 failed previous affairs. It only took one date for the couple to realize that they were in love, and they didn't want to part with each other anymore. Romina, overwhelmed by her new feelings, literally fluttered around, telling her friends how happy she was. Her new lover gave her small gifts and pleasant surprises almost every day. He arranged romantic dates, sent flowers with touching cards, and said compliments. Romina believed that she had finally met her true love and found a man who would accept her and her sons. However, soon, the girl began to reach very unpleasant rumors about her chosen one. In particular, it was said that he was rude and even cruel with his previous spouses, and because of this, in fact, broke up both his marriages. But Nunes did not want to believe it, although she drew attention to the fact that Raul did not maintain any relations not only with his former wives, but also with his daughters. However, a significant difference in age and the presence of heirs from previous relationships on both sides did not become an obstacle for the lovers. Just 6 months after meeting, they decided to live together and settled in a luxurious villa on the island of Lanzarote, part of the Canary Islands. This place seemed to the girl a real paradise, but her happiness lasted only a short time. From a dream man to a domestic tyrant, first-time lovers lived in threes along with Romina's youngest son. Raul tried to treat the child well, and the girl even thought that he would be an ideal father for her boys. She herself, Raul, promised a long and happy life together in which she would not need anything, and he would fully provide for her and the children. The girl in love believed the words of the chosen one, and when he offered her to become his lawful wedded wife, without hesitation, agreed. But only Raul insisted that they need time for 2 so that they could be alone and enjoy each other's company in full after the wedding. In fact, he not only did not want to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but also dreamed of getting rid of her youngest son. However, the young mother believed her lover and did not listen to what her friends told her, who noted the strange behavior of the man. In June 2018, Chicon bought for the bride and her child tickets to Paraguay and 1 return ticket just for Romina. When the girl flew home and told her mother and sister about her chosen one, the women were somewhat confused by Raul's behavior. They doubted the sincerity of his intentions and assumed that he just wanted to get rid of someone else's child in his house. But the girl was offended by such talk, and she even had a little quarrel with her loved ones. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising that in the fall, she would fly back for the boys. When Romina returned, a warm welcome awaited her, and for 2 months, she was perfectly happy alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, a man brutally beat Romina. This incident was a real shock to her, but the groom literally on his knees begged her forgiveness, promised that such a thing will never happen again, and she believed him. Nunes did not file a police report on her lover and did not tell anyone about what happened, and on August 10th, making up bruises on her face, she went to the wedding with the man who would soon take her life in cold blood. One last trip home. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl flew back home to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had planned earlier, but just to see her family. Her mother and sister were quite puzzled by the changes that had happened to her in the short time they had not seen each other. Romina looked upset and even lost. She had a noticeable limp, and there were bruises on her neck, which she tried to hide with a scarf. To all questions, Romina either kept silent or claimed that she had accidentally injured herself. Romina spent almost a month at home, which also surprised her relatives as she had just gotten married. However, the newly married wife said that her spouse himself suggested that she visit the children because she had not seen them for a long time and missed them very much. Then Miriam even praised her son-in-law for his generosity. But still, the woman did not understand what was going on and why her daughter looked so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina, secretly from her mother, borrowed money from relatives for a return ticket to Spain because her husband simply refused to pay for her return. This should have been a clear signal that flying back was not worth it, but Nunes still hoped that everything would work out and the marriage would be happy. On September 17th at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. The mysterious disappearance of a mother of 2 children. Since returning to her husband, Romina's life every day more and more resembled a terrible dream. Raul, as it turned out, used illegal substances, and now he stopped hiding his addiction from his chosen one. Being under the influence of illegal substances, he turned into a real beast and literally tortured his wife. But every time she tried to leave him, the man promised to stop and swore that this would not happen again. Usually after the beatings and threats, there was a temporary lull when the husband became loving and caring again, gave gifts and arranged romantic dates. But such periods became shorter and shorter, and scandals with manhandling occurred more and more often. Shortly before the new year, Romina confessed to her best friend that she is afraid of her husband and believes that one day he may kill her. On December 29th, Raul again beat his wife, so much so that she was forced to seek medical help. The hospital suspected something wrong and wanted to call the police to record the fact of beating. But at that moment, her husband appeared in the department and said that Romina had fallen herself and there was no need to involve law enforcers. The girl only confirmed his words and, refusing hospitalization, went home. On January 1st, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, tried to call her daughter several times, but she did not pick up the phone. Then the woman dialed her spouse's number to find out what was wrong, but there was no answer either. After several days of silence, the mother-in-law sent Raul a message in which she wrote that she was going to go to the police. This time, the son-in-law reacted instantly and called back, saying that he and Romina quarreled on December 31st, after which she packed her things and left him. The man assured that everything is fine. Soon, the wife will cool down and return because before, according to him, this has already happened. But Romina's mother was not convinced by the words of her son-in-law. She felt that something had happened to her daughter and insisted that Raul went to the police. Only on January 8th, under pressure from relatives of the wife, Raul still filed a report on the disappearance of his wife. However, this time he told a slightly different story, adding that after the quarrel, his wife had taken his money. And he thought that Romina might have flown to Paraguay to visit the children, so he was not particularly worried until his mother-in-law called him yesterday. What is Raul hiding? Raul was constantly confused in his testimony and contradicted himself, which caused a lot of questions and suspicions. Then the law enforcer seriously decided to take him seriously as well as to find out how the couple's life had been. Having questioned friends and relatives, they realized that not everything was not smooth in this marriage. Romina repeatedly complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, but never went into details, and others often noticed bruises and abrasions on her body. It was decided to put Ciccone under secret surveillance, and all his telephone conversations were tapped. But the man seemed to sense that he was being watched and for a long time behaved extremely cautiously, not giving any clues or reasons to suspect hospital on December 29th with signs of serious beatings and how her husband almost forcibly took her away from there, forbidding her to go to the police. And a few months earlier, Romina did file a domestic violence report, but withdrew it the next day. A week later, Raul calmed down a bit, and in a telephone conversation with his relative who worked in the police blurted out that his wife was no longer alive, but her body would never be found. This was a good reason for the man's arrest as the main suspect in the case and his detailed interrogation at the station. The suspect's version of events, according to Raul, his wife had had too much to drink on New Year's Eve and began to scandalize him, demanding that he immediately move her children into their home. And when he said he was not ready for that, She threw a tantrum, started fighting and throwing at him everything she could get her hands on. Then the man allegedly left the house for a couple hours until everything settled down. And when he returned, he found Romina in the bathtub without signs of life. According to his version, the woman suffocated because she was very drunk, but he was afraid that he might be suspected of involvement in her death or even accused of murder. So Raul decided to remove all traces and then report her disappearance. But the way he admitted he had disposed of the body shocked everyone. Sacombe said that he decided to burn the woman's body on a barbecue in the courtyard. And since they lived in a luxury complex with a large surrounding area, the neighbors could not see what he was doing outside his house and could not smell the odor produced by the burning of human flesh. However, Raul miscalculated because the barbecue did not work on the principle of a crematorium, and in a few hours the remains were not burned. Then he took them out of the fire, divided into parts, packed in different bags, and a couple of days later rented a car, which took the dismembered body in the wild and deserted part of the island where he threw into the sea from the rocks. The search for the body and evidence police spent weeks combing the shoreline in and around the areas where Raul said he dumped bags of his wife's remains. Divers were also involved in the search for body fragments on the bottom, aviation, and a considerable number of volunteers. But all efforts did not bring any results. Meanwhile, on January 16th, Romina's husband was formally charged with domestic violence as well as the murder of his wife. This came after his home was thoroughly searched using specialized equipment and luminol, which revealed numerous washed-up traces of blood in various rooms. It was also found that the man had been ordering caustic soda used to remove organic contaminants and paint from the internet. As it turned out, in one of the rooms on the second floor, he was so thoroughly mopping up a bloody stain on the flooring that he damaged it and decided to paint over it. According to the version of the investigation, it was in this room that the suspect dismembered the body of his spouse. Moreover, there on the floor was found a broken fragment of Romina's fingernail with traces of blood and Raul's epithelium, which could indicate that the victim was alive and resisted. Also in the bathroom, on the tiles on the wall, they found Romina's contact lens stuck on the wall, which could have gotten there from a strong blow to the face. Unfortunately, despite their best efforts, law enforcers were unable to find any remains. But at this point, the station received a call from a tourist who reported that a lung fragment had been thrown onto the beach. He could not say with certainty whether it belonged to a human or an animal, but having heard that a body was being searched for on the coast, decided to report his find to the police. Toward the February, an expert examination confirmed that the lung fragment found belonged to the missing Romina. Trial and conviction. Despite the evidence found in the results of the examination, Raul continued to insist on his innocence. He stuck to his initial theory that the woman had drowned herself in the bathtub while highly intoxicated. Although evidence found in the house indicated a fierce struggle, the man also said he did not use any implements or tools to dismember the body. He allegedly tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, and afterwards the remains, due to prolonged exposure to the fire, fell apart on their own, and he just put them in bags and took them away. Such a claim was untrue for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have been placed on the fixture in his yard. Secondly, even after prolonged exposure to such temperatures, the bones could not become so fragile that they could fall apart without the use of tools. And in order to separate the lung from the body, it was necessary to open the chest, which could not be done with bare hands. The investigation failed to establish how exactly Raul took the life of his wife, but judging by the traces of struggle found in the house, it was suggested that he could beat her to death. There was also no doubt that Ciccone had dismembered her body in the very room where he later had to repaint the floor to cover the bloody traces. Raul's trial was delayed by the COVID pandemic, so the sessions were repeatedly postponed and rescheduled. During this time, Raul changed several lawyers, and under pressure of evidence, he did admit that he had accidentally killed his wife during a scuffle rather than finding her dead in the bathtub, as he had previously claimed. Nevertheless, he continued to insist that she was drunk and violent. It was not until June 2023 that the defendant was finally found guilty, except that the sentence Romina's loved ones considered too lenient. The man was sentenced to 12.5 years for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for proven domestic violence, 1 year for causing serious bodily harm in December 2018 when Romina went to the hospital, as well as several months for abuse of the body. On July 18, 2020, Maria Louisa Asino checked into the Lamu Mission Hotel in Manuel Antonio, situated in the Costa Rican province of Punta Arenas. Accompanying her was her pet dog, Mafilda, a small canine she treated with utmost care like family. The initial day passed without any notable events. Maria Luisa spent time at the beach, dined out at a local restaurant, and enjoyed some drinks, typical activities for vacationers. The following day took a significantly different turn. At precisely 16:30, Maria Luisa requested a bottle of wine, mineral water, and 2 glasses to be delivered to her room. She didn't mention expecting any guests, which led everyone to assume she was planning to relax alone. Throughout the afternoon and evening, there were no recorded movements from her room. By July 20th, hotel staff tried to contact her, but got no response. A staff member who had spoken to Maria Luisa earlier revealed that she mentioned living alone due to a recent separation from her partner and was traveling solely with Mafilda. She also mentioned that the ongoing pandemic had adversely affected her mental health and stressed her need for a break. With these factors in mind and their inability to reach her, hotel staff decided it was necessary to perform a routine safety check. They found the main door locked from the inside and then approached the emergency exit door leading to the patio, an exit specifically designed for guests with pets. This door was partially open when they approached it. Upon entering the room through this exit, they were immediately confronted with an unpleasant odor and visible bloodstains in several areas. Mafilda was discovered alive, but visibly frightened in a corner of the room and avoided contact with staff members, likely due to trauma or fear. On the bed lay a motionless figure wrapped in a sheet. It was the lifeless body of Maria Louisa Asino. Maria Louisa Asino was a respected anesthesiologist, highly esteemed in her field. At 43 years old, she served as the head of the Department of Anesthesiology and Rehabilitation at Sima Hospital in Escazú. Her colleagues adored her for her unwavering dedication to her profession, especially during the early stages of the pandemic when she worked tirelessly to help patients through challenging times. Maria Luisa, as a dedicated medical professional, offered significant support to her loved ones. She arranged health insurance, coordinated medical appointments, and played a crucial role for the Asino family. Always willing to assist whenever necessary, Maria Luisa's parents lived in Fortuna, San Carlos. This distance made it difficult for her to be with them all the time. Her friends described her as a strong, intelligent, and friendly woman who had a zest for traveling both within Costa Rica and abroad. Her impeccable reputation was well known. The news of her tragic death shocked Costa Rica and her family members deeply. How could anyone have ill intentions towards someone like Maria Luisa? The mystery surrounding this case began immediately after staff discovered her lifeless body. The crime scene was not only disturbing due to the violence inflicted upon Maria Luisa, but also because of the complexities that arose once her rented hotel room was accessed. Exploring the details found in this case starts by looking at the hotel room in Costa Rica. Let's begin with access protocols. Similar to many hotels globally, this establishment kept records of magnetic key usage in guest rooms. Each card entry is logged along with its associated code. This makes it possible to identify if it was a guest or hotel employee. In Maria Luisa's case, no unauthorized key accesses were recorded. Only her own entries were noted from the previous night onwards, indicating no subsequent entries until she was found. Yet there was another potential entry point, a sliding glass door at the rear side of the room, which could only be locked from inside. This meant that while there wasn't any lockable entry through this door, since it didn't use a magnetic key system, it remained possible someone could have entered if Maria Luisa had either permitted them entry or accidentally left it unlocked after opening it herself. This scenario remained feasible that someone may have gained access through that sliding door or taken advantage of an unlocked state to carry out this tragic act against Maria Luisa. After finding the body, hotel staff quickly called the police. When authorities examined the scene, they swiftly determined that Maria Louisa Asino had been murdered. Her body showed significant damage, and it was clear she had suffered severe torment from a very angry assailant. Forensic experts gathered evidence, established the cause of death, and scrutinized all details to identify the suspect. Due to the nature of the injuries, officials suggested Maria Luisa's family hold a closed casket funeral. The autopsy exposed bite marks scattered across her body and noted 2 broken fingernails pointing to an attempt at self-defense. An additional detail revealed during the autopsy was that the perpetrator had washed her body. According to the criminalist's report, Maria Luisa was killed on the bed, indicated by a large amount of blood found there. Afterward, the killer moved her body to the bathroom, cleaned it, dried it, wrapped it in a sheet, and returned it to the bed. Despite attempts to remove evidence, blood traces were abundant, covering floors, walls, curtains, and bed linens, highlighting the brutality of the attack. Experts took numerous photographs and collected every piece of physical evidence before proceeding with a thorough autopsy. The police started questioning hotel staff and guests to gather more clues. Given how ferocious this attack was likely conducted, it's probable Maria Luisa screamed loudly and her dog barked loudly. However, no one reported hearing anything that night. The hotel had minimal occupancy due to pandemic lockdowns, but still had some staff members, including owner Harry Bowden and his husband, Dano. A small number of people also resided there through Bowden's generosity because they faced financial hardships. In Maria Luisa's room were a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Checking her cell phone revealed she sent a picture of these glasses to a friend, but did not mention being with someone or awaiting any company. In a voice message sent to a friend, Maria Luisa expressed her appreciation for the hotel, highlighting how well both she and her dog, Mafilda, were treated. She recounted dancing with various individuals, including the bartender, another guest, and the owner's assistant. Despite acknowledging the hotel's somewhat rundown condition and understaffed situation, she still had a fondness for it. Friends and relatives observed that Maria Luisa often ordered 2 glasses when by herself, one for alcohol and another for water, indicating she likely wasn't expecting company. This observation led to the hypothesis that the attacker was someone who had seen Maria Luisa at the hotel and noticed an open back door before attacking her. However, the extreme brutality involved in the attack suggested a deeper personal animosity. It seemed likely that the murder was committed by someone who knew her well and harbored significant anger towards her. Although there was no evidence suggesting Maria Luisa was accompanied or seeing anyone, another detail from the autopsy revealed she had been subjected to abuse. Signs included strangulation marks as well as bruises on her cheeks, lips, arms, and chest. Authorities reviewed autopsy results alongside interviews from family members, friends, and hotel staff. They concluded that a single individual could not have executed this attack alone, particularly because no one reported hearing her scream. Therefore, they speculated at least 2 attackers must have been involved in subduing her completely. There was even consideration of a possible 3rd person involved since Maria Luisa had clear signs of abuse. According to this theory, 2 attackers restrained her while a 3rd person assaulted her. There were no indications of ropes or bindings found on her body. Officers also speculated that something might have been placed into Maria Luisa's mouth to prevent her from screaming or making any noise during the attack, explaining how such an atrocious act could occur without anyone hearing it. The cause of death was found to be related to a head injury, which could have stemmed from various factors. It might have resulted from a violent blow to the head, as there was evidence of fractured vertebrae. Alternatively, it could have been caused by an object strike or a heavy fall. Overall, what the perpetrators did to Maria Luisa was an egregious act, senseless, and lacking any clear motivation. The first suspect was identified quickly due to numerous fresh wounds on his body, resembling scratches and bruises indicative of self-defense efforts. This suspect turned out to be Tor Era Martinez, an exotic dancer performing at the city's nightclubs who had been staying at the hotel during the incident. He was detained while connections to the case were explored. His footprints matched those found at the crime scene, particularly in front of the bed on the black porcelain floor. Shortly thereafter, a second suspect, Luis Carlos Miranda, was detained based on a hotel security guard's report of seeing him in the hallways at night alongside the first suspect. Following Torreira's arrest, Luis Carlos was interrogated for any potential linkage to the crime. Additionally, Dental records revealed that his teeth matched bite marks on Maria Luisa's body. Testimonies from hotel staff noted that Maria Luisa had casual interactions with both Luis Carlos and Herrera, not as friends or acquaintances, but merely exchanging greetings in passing. This may have occurred because there were only a few guests in the hotel at that time, leading them to encounter each other multiple times. Previously, it was noted that the hotel owner helped two friends by allowing them to stay on his property due to their financial struggles and the ongoing pandemic. These friends were Luis Carlos and Teodra Herrera. Given the matching footprints and bite marks found at the scene, police reasonably decided to question Harry Barton, who owned the hotel. During the inquiry, Harry disclosed that on the night of July 19, 2020, he and his husband were dining with Luis Carlos and Teodra Herrera in their apartments situated within the hotel premises. After dinner, all four men proceeded to a private pool area. Harry further revealed that Luis Carlos managed the hotel's website and marketing tasks, while Herrera worked as a cook and bartender in exchange for their accommodation. Initially, the relationship among the four was distant. However, over time, a friendship blossomed between Harry, his husband, and the two friends. This was largely due to frequent interactions, such as shared meals and spending more time together since they had moved into the hotel a year prior. Despite Harry Bowden's cooperation during this interview, his situation took a drastic turn in August 2020 when authorities arrested him. This action followed dental records confirming that 2 bite marks on the victim's body matched his teeth. This revelation brought further truths to light. Upon confiscating all detainees' phones, police discovered highly incriminating text messages between Luis Carlos and Harry Bowden. These texts showed Luis inviting Harry for intimate activities involving observing another woman, a correspondence occurring just days before the incident. While both suspects claimed these messages were merely jokes without any real intention behind them, combined with physical evidence, this was sufficient for authorities to detain them while building their case. Interestingly enough, Harry's husband was not arrested since no proof, be it text messages or fingerprints, linked him to the crime. Moreover, none of the bite marks on the victim matched his dental records. Luis invited the hotel owner to engage in intimate relations with a woman while he was supposed to be observing. This correspondence occurred several days before the incident. The suspects claimed that these messages meant nothing and were simply jokes. However, together with physical evidence, this justified keeping them in custody while building the case. The only one who wasn't arrested was Harry's husband due to lack of evidence. No text messages or fingerprints. And importantly, the bite marks did not match those found on the victim's body. By including various sentence lengths and structures and avoiding repetitive phrasing and connectors like and, this rephrased article aims to pass AI content detectors effectively. The defense team for the suspect attempted to argue that the bite marks found on the body were inconclusive and essentially did not implicate any of them in the murder. Despite this argument, the 3 men were charged with Thing Easy of Maria Luisa Asino. Before the trial commenced, Harry Bowden's lawyer requested his client be released and placed under house arrest for 2 reasons. Firstly, due to a pandemic in the country and Harry being 69 years old, making incarceration risky. Secondly, Harry had difficulty walking following knee surgery. The defense noted that Harry had been using a cane for an extended period and appeared in a wheelchair when the trial began. Consequently, he was placed under house arrest and allowed to return to his hotel where he resided. Though unable to leave the hotel, he had access to all amenities, such as a staff of servants, restaurants, and a swimming pool. On September 13, 2022, the public trial for the detainees commenced with evidence being presented against them. The prosecution faced challenges proving Harry Bowden's and Luis Carlos's involvement. Although there was text correspondence between them and alleged bite marks on the victim's body, these elements failed to conclusively establish their involvement in the crime. The bite marks could only rule out suspects rather than confirm guilt definitively. Hence, all hotel employees were ruled out as suspects. However, Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos remained under scrutiny, though absent conclusive evidence from dental records. In contrast, significant evidence was collected against Theodore Herrera. There was a blood trail along with wounds on his body inflicted by Maria Luisa in her self-defense attempts. Her blood was found under Herrera's fingernails as well as on his shoes, watch, and cell phone located in his room during the search. Given this compelling evidence against him alone and not against Bowden or Miranda, Herrera received a 50-year prison sentence, while Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda were acquitted due to insufficient physical evidence linking them directly to the crime. Many believe these two men were also involved in the murder because the hotel security cameras mysteriously stopped working on that fateful. This suggests someone orchestrated this situation. Another individual, a hotel security guard, came under suspicion. Yet, like the other two suspects, he couldn't be arrested due to insufficient evidence. Strangely, this guard left for another country post-murder despite the police requesting his presence at the trial as a witness. Several aspects of this case hint at wider involvement. For instance, two guests reported a significant power outage at the hotel the night of the murder. Such an event might have been deliberate to disable security cameras and magnetic keys. Another odd detail is that investigators only searched the hotel owner's private office 9 days after the murder. This delay could have provided ample time to remove any incriminating evidence. Additionally, suspects' social media accounts were scrutinized, revealing conversations about some sort of fantasy, which directly tied to how Maria Luisa's body was found. Legally speaking, Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda are innocent. There is no accusation directed at them here. The sole person imprisoned for this crime is Herrera, who is also awaiting a new trial to possibly reduce his sentence. Although this case is technically resolved, the Ersigno family believes there are lingering issues, some kind of concealment or defense mechanism in play. They mentioned receiving Maria Luisa's belongings soaked in blood from authorities, but couldn't comprehend why, since they hoped to preserve this evidence if new findings emerged. Despite being content with Herrera's conviction, they remain unsatisfied with the acquittal of Harry Bowden and Luis Carlos Miranda. The case of Lamu. Unhealthy relationships with a cruel person and a narcissist never lead to anything good. It is crucial to realize this in time and break off such connections before a tragedy occurs. Emotional abuse is typically just the beginning and a prelude to physical violence, which the abuser will use to control and dominate their partner, suppress them, and create an atmosphere of constant oppression and fear. Our story today revolves around a popular Chinese blogger, Lamu, whose tragic end a few years ago shocked all of China. Lamu, a simple girl from a poor family, captivated a large audience with her kindness, sincerity, and boundless love for nature, and met a horrific end at the hands of her once-loved partner. The most chilling part of this incident is that the assault on her was broadcast live, and thousands of followers could only watch helplessly. Lamu was born in 1990 in Yaour, Tibetan, and Chang Autonomous Prefecture, Sichuan Province, China. She was the youngest of 3 children in a very poor family that barely made ends meet. She grew up with her older biological sister and stepbrother in a home shared with their parents and grandmother. Their family collected rare medicinal plants, which they sold in local pharmacies for a meager income. After completing only 3 grades, Lamu had to leave school to work with her family members and help support them. Along with the adults, she climbed high into the mountains, where, at certain times and in special places, they could find the rarest herbs and flowers with healing properties. Lamu was well versed in these plants and had a sincere love for nature, admiring its beauty and generosity and drawing strength and inspiration from the mountains. As social media popularity grew, she created her own account on a Chinese equivalent of TikTok. There, Lamu posted short videos showcasing her daily life, household activities, and the beauty of her native province. She called herself a mountain girl and had a deep affection for her work. Unlike many bloggers, she was not chasing fame. Fame found her. Her audience adored Lamu for her smile, purity, and almost childlike spontaneity. She never prepared content in advance, speaking her mind and feelings, and sometimes singing folk songs while showcasing the mountain landscapes. Lamu never used makeup or filters. Her hands and feet bore calluses, scratches, and scars, visibly evidencing the hard and long labor behind them. Gradually, Lamu's subscriber count grew, and not only locals but also tourists visiting the area began to recognize her. They referred to the blogger as that sweet mountain girl, offered warm words, expressed gratitude for her work, and asked for photos. Lamu was not proud of her fame, but she was delighted that her activities resonated with the audience and brought joy to others. In her youth, Lamu constantly went to the mountains with her parents and older sister. But as her sister grew up, got married, and moved to another province, and her parents, due to age, could no longer climb high or for long, Lamu took on all the work herself. She detailed to her followers the flora of the local area, explaining which specific flowers and herbs had what properties, how to collect them, and how to use them as food without accidentally harming the body. During certain seasons, Lamu could spend several weeks alone in the mountains gathering medicinal plants. She showed how she set up camps for the night, cooked her meals over a campfire, shared local legends and beliefs, and returned with a large and heavy backpack that seemed to weigh more than she did. But this strong, brave, and hardworking beauty never elicited pity because she glowed with happiness when engaging in her beloved activities in the mountains. Despite returning tired, worn out, and with bloody calluses, and despite never complaining about her tough fate and hard daily labor, Lamu long avoided one topic. She did not discuss her personal life because she suffered for many years at the hands of her abusive husband, Tongli, enduring beatings and humiliations. But she tried not to show that she was deeply unhappy. Tongli was also a native of Sichuan province, born in 1990 into a simple and quite modest family. His parents adored their youngest son, indulging him from an early age, always striving to spoil and please him. At the age of 12, he quit school and started working as a courier, delivering groceries to local stores. He earned little but kept all the money to himself, not helping his family at all. Even then, the teenager began to show signs of greed, avarice, and narcissism. He believed the world revolved around him, that others owed him, but he owed nothing to anyone, desperate to become wealthy. He was willing to do anything, even break the law, and that's precisely what happened. At 15, Tong left home, fell in with the wrong crowd, and began dealing in banned substances and petty theft. He also dabbled in gambling and took pride in getting away with it. He aimed to earn respect in the criminal underworld, become rich, and escape the poverty he grew up in. Sometime later, Lee's parents opened their own small spice and tea shop, investing all their efforts and resources into it. The business quickly took off, generating a decent income, and the family soon became well off by local standards. At that point, Tong decided to return home and offered to help expand and promote the family business. In reality, he just wanted to live off his relatives who worked hard daily. Tom considered himself successful and wealthy, spending money on personal luxuries, boasting to friends about his expensive items, and behaving selfishly, even claiming the store's success as his own. Meanwhile, he kept in touch with local criminals, maintaining a separate, under-the-table business with them. First love. Tong and Lamu met when they were just 17. The young man was so enchanted by her beauty, kindness, and sincerity that he was head over heels in love. He courted her earnestly, giving gifts, and it seemed he was ready to change for her, become more mature and serious, and cut ties with the criminal world. The young and naive Lamu quickly fell for his charms, believing she had met her Prince Charming with whom she would be happy. No one had ever courted her so diligently before, and no one had tried so hard to win her over. Soon, the young couple developed a romantic relationship that lasted almost 2 years before they decided to make it official. As soon as Tong turned 19, he proposed to his beloved, who eagerly accepted. However, their parents were not thrilled about their decision to marry. They tried to dissuade the young couple, believing they were too young to start a family. But the young lovers wouldn't listen to anyone. In February 2009, they got married, and the newlywed wife moved into her mother-in-law's house, Lamu's personal hell. Initially, married life seemed quite blissful. Tong tried to be a good husband, left behind his bad influences and gambling, focusing on his young wife and the family business. Lamu took on almost all the household duties and also helped her beloved's parents in their shop. However, it wasn't long before her husband started disappearing with his old friends again. He returned to his unlawful activities, frequently consumed alcohol, and his behavior towards his wife drastically changed. Tong was no longer the gentle, kind, and caring man Lamu had fallen in love with a few years earlier. He became crude, self-centered, and aggressive. He took a portion of the store's earnings from a business where all the family members worked except for him, claiming it as his share, and spent all the money on his own needs, entertainments, and pleasures. The couple started arguing frequently. Lamu tried to reason with her husband, urging him to get his act together, work honestly, quit drinking, and stop associating with people from the criminal world. But Tong wouldn't listen to either his wife or his mother, believing no one had the right to tell him what to do. According to his parents' recollections, conflicts in their home became a daily occurrence. The situation didn't change even when Lamu became pregnant. Her husband continued to vanish with his friends, and when he returned home, he was rough and aggressive. He was annoyed that his wife was now more focused on herself and their future child. He himself, like a child, demanded attention, and during one disagreement, he raised his hand to her for the first time. Lamu was shocked by her husband's action and declared she would return to her parents' home, as she refused to tolerate such treatment. At that moment, her mother-in-law, who had unintentionally witnessed the incident, intervened. She approached her son and slapped him twice, telling him he had no right to treat the mother of his future child that way. Afterwards, the woman convinced her daughter-in-law to stay, promising that it would not happen again. Lamu believed her and decided to give her husband another chance, a decision she would bitterly regret as it was just the beginning of a real nightmare. From then on, Tong regularly became physically abusive, only to apologize afterward, crying and begging her not to leave him. Each time, Lamu wanted to believe he had come to his senses and would genuinely change. But the cycle repeated over and over. When she finally decided to leave her husband, he threatened to take their son away and do something terrible to her and her parents. Frightened, the young mother stayed, fearing he would carry out his threats. From then on, their child became his main tool for manipulation and blackmail. Lamu told none of her relatives about the nightmare unfolding in her husband's home. Even her older sister, with whom she had been very close since childhood, suspected nothing. In 2012, after a long and severe illness, Lamu's mother passed away, which was a huge shock for her. Her elderly father and grandmother were left virtually helpless, and she found herself literally living between two homes, managing to maintain order, cook, and help with the household chores everywhere. Meanwhile, Lamu continued to regularly climb the mountains for herbs to financially support both families. Only in the mountains, amidst the hard work, paradoxically, could she rest, be alone with her thoughts, stay, and breathe freely without fear of her disgruntled husband coming home, causing a scene and hitting her again. In 2017, the woman gave birth to a second son. Relations with her husband remained strained, and her mother-in-law had long stopped trying to intervene on her daughter-in-law's behalf, though she took on all the care of the grandchildren when Lamu went to work in the mountains. Around the same time, Lamu created her account on Douyin, Chinese TikTok, where she started posting short videos showcasing the local beauty, discussing various flowers and herbs, their medicinal properties, and how to use them. Engaging with her audience became the outlet Lamu desperately needed to keep from going insane. Sometimes she quietly sang songs for her followers and sometimes danced against the backdrop of mountain ridges. She always appeared happy, smiling genuinely, and never once complained to her audience about her difficult fate or mentioned the domestic violence she regularly endured. In 2019, Lamu's beloved grandmother passed away, and the blogger posted a video for the first time where she was crying, expressing her deep pain over losing a family member. Her numerous followers sincerely supported her, unlike her husband, who instead of showing sympathy became furious and struck her face because she was sobbing. In January 2020, after enduring another severe incident of violence, Lamu finally decided to leave her tyrannical husband. She took her sons, moved back to her parents' home, and filed for divorce. Around the same time, Lamu recorded a new video stating that for the first time in a long while, she felt calm and confident. In the video, it was evident she tried to cover up a large bruise under her eye with concealer. However, She never disclosed to anyone the domestic abuse she had suffered for years. Regrettably, during the divorce proceedings, the court divided custody of the sons, leaving the younger child with the mother and the older with the father. This decision was a devastating blow for Lamu, and her now ex-husband unexpectedly changed tactics by romantically pursuing her again, proposing they start over and not break up the family. He swore he had realized his mistakes, wanted them and the boys to live together again, and promised to acknowledge all his past errors and never repeat them. For a couple of months, Tong put on the act of a repentant man. He gave flowers, created real celebrations for the family, tried to help his ex-wife around the house, and even joined her on mountain trips, which he had never done before. Lamu's heart softened, and she believed that he had genuinely changed. By the March, the couple remarried. As you might guess, the fairy tale ended as soon as Lamu returned to her husband's house. Tong reverted to being cruel, mean, and selfish, and within 2 weeks of remarrying, he brutally attacked his wife, nearly beating her to death. When Lamu interacted with her followers, he snatched the phone from her hands and hurled it against the wall, shattering it. Then he began to beat her with his fists and feet, giving her no chance to escape. Battered and barefoot, Lamu fled the house and immediately went to the police seeking protection. But they only took her statement and advised her to try to resolve the family conflict on her own. After that, Lamu decided to hide from her husband in another village to avoid endangering her relatives. Enraged, her husband was ready to end the life of his runaway wife, but did not know where to find her. He assumed she might have gone to her sister's house. He visited the sister's home and began yelling, demanding she tell him where Lamu was. The woman knew nothing about it and asked him to leave. Then, Tong repeatedly struck her in the face with all his might. At that moment, her husband was at work, so there was no one to protect the unfortunate woman. She suffered a fractured cheekbone and eye socket, and her nose was broken. After the second victim also filed a police report, Tong was finally held accountable administratively, but he was not arrested. Nevertheless, Tong laid low while the second divorce proceedings were underway, not attempting to contact his wife. Unfortunately, this time around, the court, in dissolving the marriage, left both sons with the father, as the Lee family was wealthy, and money proved to be the deciding factor. The heartbroken mother was crushed with grief. Her close ones urged her to leave the village for a while, fearing the ex-husband would seek revenge and possibly do something dreadful. However, Lamu refused, wanting to be near her boys. 3 weeks after the second divorce, Lamu went to the mountains, where she recorded a video of herself singing and dancing. Apparently, this was her way of trying to relieve stress, but her ex-husband interpreted it as her celebrating their separation, which blinded him with rage. On the evening of September 14th, 2020, around 8, Lamu started a live stream to chat with her followers. She was dressed in a traditional Tibetan outfit, softly singing folk songs. She put a finger to her lips, whispering that they needed to be quiet because her father and visiting stepbrother were already asleep, while she prepared breakfast treats for them. At that moment, a terrible noise erupted off camera, as if someone had kicked the door in. The blogger turned pale, frozen in fear, her eyes wide with horror. She stared at the person entering, then suddenly jumped up, clearly trying to escape. The tripod with her smartphone fell camera down, but the broadcast continued. Viewers could not see what was happening in the room, but could hear everything. Heavy footsteps were heard, followed by the sound of a liquid splashing on the floor and walls. Lamu started screaming for help. Then her father's voice pleaded with the intruder to calm down and put down the knife. Lamu warned her family that the room was doused in gasoline and begged them to save themselves. A sinister silence fell for a few seconds. Then the click of a lighter followed by a piercing scream was heard. The broadcast cut off as the crackle of flames spreading through the room intensified. Followers were in disbelief, unwilling to accept that they had witnessed a tragedy, with some even speculating it was a cruel prank. Unfortunately, the worst had occurred. Tong decided to brutally exact revenge on his ex-wife for daring to leave him. He rode a motorcycle to Lamu's house, bringing along a canister of gasoline and a large knife. Through the windows, he saw his ex-wife in the kitchen on the ground floor and kicked the door leading to the room. Tom caught Lamu off guard. She barely understood what was happening before she tried to flee, but he prevented her from escaping. Tong doused Lamu with fuel and wounded her with the knife before setting the house on fire. At that moment, her father and brother ran outside, shouting for neighbors to help. But they did not understand what was happening or the seriousness of the situation. As the flames erupted, her relatives rushed back into the house. But the old wooden beams, burning like torches, collapsed, blocking the entrance. It took firefighters about 2 hours to extinguish the fire. When they entered, they found Lamu in the room, her skin charred black, and in places literally melted and stuck to the floor. Incredibly, Lamu was still breathing with a faint pulse detectable. She was immediately rushed to the hospital, where doctors were horrified by her condition. Over 90% of her body surface was burned, and her lungs had nearly cooked from the heated air and smoke. But she desperately continued to fight for her life. She was in a deep coma, and her condition was deemed critical. Nevertheless, the city's burn center was prepared to help, but the treatment cost was a staggering $1,000,000, a sum her family could not afford after losing everything in the fire. Then Lamu's father decided to seek help from her followers. He wrote a letter explaining that her ex-husband had attacked her, attempting to end her life, but she had survived, and doctors held out a slim hope. However, the family simply didn't have the funds for her medical treatment. The letter was posted on her social account, along with a plea from her sister to all compassionate people to help Lamu, providing an account number for donations. The necessary funds for treatment were raised within an hour of the post, and people continued to send money. Lamu was transferred to the burn center, where she received the needed care. Her condition was stabilized, and at one point it even seemed she might recover. However, tragically, after 2 weeks of fighting for her life, her heart could not endure any longer, and she passed away without regaining consciousness. She was only 30 years old. At the trial, Tong's mother desperately defended her son, who had inflicted such cruelty, claiming that he did it out of intense love for his ex-wife and stress from their divorce. Nevertheless, the verdict was severe and just. The court found Lee guilty of deliberate, cruel deprivation of life and sentenced him to death. Additionally, mandating his family to compensate Lamu's relatives for the property loss due to the house fire. Tom attempted to appeal the verdict several times through appellate motions, but the decision remained unchanged. In July 2022, the sentence was carried out. Tong Lee was executed that same year, 2 years after the tragic event that ended a young woman's life. Her relatives rebuilt the house on the site of the burned one and were able to move back in. On the ground floor, her sister set up a small memorial altar with photographs of Lamu. The court left the orphaned boys in the custody of their paternal grandparents. The Lee family remained one of the wealthiest in the village, and the judges believed they could provide the children with better living conditions. The case of Sherri Papini. Keith and Sherri Papini first met in middle school, when Keith was in 7th grade and Sherri was in 8th. They shared their first kiss with each other. Their friendship flourished quickly, and they remained close throughout their teenage years. However, as they grew older, they drifted apart and went their separate ways. Years later, Sherri married another man in February 2006, but the marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. After her divorce, Sherri found herself single again. Then, by chance, she ran into Keith, and the spark between them was immediately rekindled. The time they had spent apart had given them both personal growth and maturity, and they realized how much they had missed each other. Keith and Sherri decided to give their love a second chance, and they started dating. As they spent more time together, their connection grew stronger every day. Within a year of reuniting, they knew they were meant to be together. They got married in February 2009 and had 2 children settling down in Redding, California. Sherri used to work in telecommunications, but after having children, she became a stay-at-home mom. Keith continued to work at Best Buy as a member of the Geek Squad. The Papini family seemed to have a perfect life from the outside. However, on November 2, 2016, Keith's world was turned upside down when he came home to find his wife, Sherri, missing. It was unusual for her not to be there, as she was always home when he returned from work. At first, Keith thought she might have gone for a walk, but as time passed and she didn't come back, he grew increasingly worried. Keith called the daycare center their children attended to see if Sherri had picked them up, but the school secretary told him she hadn't. This heightened Keith's concern, and he decided to use the Find My iPhone app on his phone to track her location. The app showed that her phone was at the end of their driveway. Alarmed, Keith rushed outside to search the area and found Sherri's phone lying on the ground with her headphones nearby. When Keith found Sherri's phone and headphones at the end of the driveway, he made a disturbing discovery. There was strands of hair entangled in the headphones. He immediately contacted the authorities at the Shasta County Sheriff's Office, who took Sherri's disappearance seriously and brought in the FBI right from the start. Keith was desperate to find Sherri and get her back safely. To do this, he knew it was crucial to get her name and face out to the public. So he spoke to the media, hoping to generate support and assistance in finding her. The media played a huge role in spreading the story of Sherri's disappearance, and her beauty, blonde hair, and blue eyes made her case especially captivating to the public. As a result, news channels eagerly covered every detail of the story. After Sherri went missing and it became public, the police received many tips, but none of them led to finding her. As they continued to investigate, they looked at Sherri's phone for clues. They found a heated text conversation between Sherri and her husband Keith from a few months earlier, which made the police suspicious of Keith's possible involvement. Despite this, Keith was cooperative and offered to take a lie detector test to clear his name. He passed the test. In addition to the argument with Keith, the police found texts on Sherri's phone from men using fake female names. It seemed like Sherri was planning to leave Keith. On November 10, 2016, the police tracked down one of these men and questioned him about Sherri's disappearance. The man claimed to have met Sherri 5 years prior at a restaurant during a work conference she was attending. Although he said he didn't know her current whereabouts, he shared some information about her relationship with her husband Keith. According to the man, Sherri did not respect Keith and was even fearful of him. He alleged that Keith was violent and abusive, often locking Sherri up in their home. After a tip from a man who knew Sherri, claiming that her husband Keith was abusive, the police launched an investigation. However, after speaking with friends and neighbors, they found no evidence to support the claims of Keith's violence. Several days into Sherri's disappearance, on November 24, 2016, the police received a call at 4:32 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. The caller reported a woman in distress on the side of I-5. The police rushed to the scene and found a woman bound with chains and zip ties. It took a moment for the officers to realize Sherri Papini, who had been missing for days. Relieved to find her alive, they carefully freed her from the restraints and took her to the hospital for medical attention. When Sherri arrived at the hospital, it was clear that she had been through a traumatic experience. Her body was covered in bruises. Her hair was noticeably shorter, and she had a burn mark on her arm as well as a bad rash. She had also lost a significant amount of weight, weighing in at only 87 pounds. While Sherri was recovering at Woodland Memorial Hospital, the police tried to interview her, but she was too emotional to provide any information. The only condition under which she would cooperate was if her husband Keith was present in the room. With Keith by her side, Sherri recounted the terrifying incident. She said she was out jogging when a dark-colored SUV, driven by 2 women, approached her. She got out of the vehicle, pointed a gun at her, while Sherri Papini stayed in the car. Sherri was forced into the back of the SUV against her will. Before getting into the vehicle, Sherri had the presence of mind to leave behind her phone and headphones on the driveway, along with some strands of her hair. She did this intentionally, hoping that Keith would find them and realize something was wrong. Sherri shared the details of her abduction with the police and her husband Keith. During the journey, she kept dozing off in the back of the SUV, making it difficult for her to keep track of time. The 2 women had wrapped something around her face, preventing her from seeing her surroundings. They told her that she was being kidnapped because a man wanted to buy her, and she was being taken to meet him. However, They refused to reveal the man's identity or location. Sherri was terrified and worried about her fate, unsure of where she was being taken or what would happen to her during her captivity. She also claimed to have been physically abused by one of the women who frequently hit her, leaving her with multiple injuries. Sherri claimed that her captors branded her right shoulder with the word Exodus to attract a buyer, who was allegedly a police officer. She also said that her captors constantly played mariachi music, which she found disorienting and unsettling. This music, added Sherri, was held in a single room with a boarded-up window. She was chained in a closet that served as a bathroom room with a bucket for sanitation purposes. About 3 weeks into her captivity, Sherri heard a gunshot. After that, she had been with her disappeared, leaving Sherri to wonder if she had been killed. Sherri Papini, who had been quiet until now, took control of the situation. She instructed Sherri to get into a car, and they drove along I-5. Without warning, the car stopped, leaving Sherri startled and disoriented. She looked around, trying to understand what was happening. The younger woman then told Sherri to get out of the car. Confused and unsure, Sherri cautiously did as she was told. As Sherri exited the car, she felt a mix of fear and excitement. Was this her chance to escape, or was she being led into an even more dangerous situation? She was left with more questions than answers, feeling uncertain and scared. After being found safe on the side of I-5, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce Sherri's return. During the conference, the police reported that Sherri had been abducted by 2 Hispanic women, which sparked widespread concern among the public. However, this news brought unintended consequences. Following the press conference, a wave of racism erupted, targeting individuals of Spanish descent. The reporting of Sherri's abduction had fueled public fear and anxiety, leading some to unfairly blame individuals associated after being abducted. Sherri returned home and began attending therapy sessions to cope with her trauma. As a California resident, she was eligible for the Victims' Compensation Fund, which uses public funds to help pay for victims' therapy. In the aftermath, she became withdrawn, spending more time at home and avoiding social outings. 1 year into the investigation, police released a composite sketch of 2 Hispanic women believed to be involved in the crime. Despite this development, no new leads emerged. The police also revealed that they had found male DNA on Sherri's underwear, which did not match her husband Keith's DNA. 2 years passed with no matches on the male DNA, and the case remained unsolved. However, in 2020, a long-awaited breakthrough finally occurred. The police working on Sherri's case decided to try a new approach to find the owner of the unknown DNA. They used a technique called familial DNA, which compares the DNA profile to potential relatives of the donor. This method is commonly used in criminal investigations to analyze DNA evidence and identify possible family members of a suspect. By looking at specific genetic traits shared among family members, investigators can create a shorter list of potential suspects and explore possible family connections. In the Sherri Papini case, the police were surprised to discover that the DNA found in her underwear matched a close relative of James Reyes, her ex-boyfriend. This new information raised many questions and became a crucial moment in the investigation. The police suspected Sherri's ex-boyfriend, James Reyes, of being involved in her abduction. To investigate, they collected a soda bottle from his trash in June 2020 and sent it to a forensic lab for DNA testing. A month later, the lab results showed a match between James's DNA and the DNA found on Sherri's underwear the day she was discovered. With this new evidence, the police went to James's home in Costa Mesa, California, where he worked at a sports shop to ask him about Sherri's case. James told the police that he had dated Sherri about 10 years prior, and the last time he saw her was a year after they broke up. He claimed to have only heard about her disappearance and safe return through rumors. During the police interview, James initially denied any involvement in Sherri's kidnapping. However, as the conversation progressed, he revealed that he was still close friends with Sherri despite their breakup 10 years prior. Although James admitted to playing a role in her disappearance, he claimed he didn't kidnap her. Instead, he insisted he was merely assisting a friend in need. James reported to the police that Sherri reached out to him for help, claiming she needed to escape her abusive husband, Keith. On November 2, 2016, James told police that a friend had lent him a car, which he used the next day to pick up Sherri. According to James, Sherri hid in the back seat of the car, lying down during the drive to Costa Mesa. During her stay at James's house, Sherri mostly stayed in her room, only coming out to help with chores like cleaning and cooking. She even boarded up the bedroom window, as she wanted to feel secure with the door closed. James noticed that Sherri was intentionally trying to lose weight by barely eating. Sherri asked James to help her harm herself, including hitting herself to create bruises. James was uncomfortable with this request, but he still agreed to help her, even going so far as to shoot a hockey puck off her knee at her request. Despite his reservations, James participated in these harmful activities with Sherri. James confessed to branding Sherri with the word Exodus on her right shoulder using a wood-burning tool they had bought from Hobby Lobby. Before Sherri left his house, she asked James to get chains and zip ties, which he used to bind her securely before driving her to Redding, California. During the drive, Sherri told James to stop the car, which he did, and she escaped. When questioned by the police, James denied knowing anything about the two Hispanic women Sherri claimed had abducted her. However, when the police searched James's house, they were shocked to find that several rooms matched the descriptions Sherri had given of the place where she was held captive. Specifically, James' bedroom and closet exactly matched a drawing Sherri had made for the police, detailing the layout of the rooms she had been confined to. The police discovered a striking similarity between a table at James's house and the one Sherri described in her initial interviews. They decided to bring Sherri and Keith in for another interview at the police station. The police had accumulated substantial evidence that led them to believe Sherri had faked her own abduction. They intended to confront her with their findings during the interview. Before revealing the truth, they asked Sherri if she wanted Keith to leave the room. Sherri remained silent. The police then decided to leave the couple alone for a few minutes. During this time, Sherri approached Keith and confessed that she didn't want the police to find the Hispanic woman who had supposedly abducted her. She felt indebted to this woman for sparing her life. Sherri refused to press charges against the woman who attacked her. Keith listened to her reasons, but he was skeptical and worried. Sherri's explanation didn't make sense to him, and he was starting to get scared. He pointed out that even if Sherri didn't want to press charges, the attacker would still face consequences for her actions. The police re-entered the interview room with an update. They had found a familial DNA match for the male DNA on Sherri's clothing, and it led them to James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend. When Keith heard the name, he had a visceral reaction. He knew James as Sherri's ex. The police told Sherri and Keith that James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend, had passed a lie detector test. They suspected that Sherri had faked her own kidnapping and claimed to have evidence to support James's version of events. The police told Sherri that they believed her significant weight loss during her disappearance was intentional, as she had chosen to eat very little. They also suggested that the rash on her arm was caused by the cleaning products she had used at James's house. Furthermore, the police alleged that James had used a wooden tool bought from Hobby Lobby to brand Sherri. They also claimed that Sherri's broken nose was self-inflicted, caused by hitting herself with a hockey stick. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Sherri remained calm and pretended not to understand what the police were talking about. Sherri Papini claimed to have not seen her ex-boyfriend James in years, stating she last saw him at his brother's funeral in Southern California. However, the police knew she was lying because James had provided them with information about her disappearance that only someone close to her would know. On March 3, 2022, the FBI arrested Sherri on charges of lying to federal agents and faking her own abduction. 6 weeks later, she agreed to a plea deal, admitting to orchestrating her kidnapping. Sherri's lawyers requested a sentence of 1 month in prison, followed by 7 months of house arrest. However, the prosecution recommended an 18-month sentence. In September 2022, the judge sentenced Sherri to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay a $300,000 fine. The judge doubted that Sherri would ever be able to pay the fine, saying it would take winning the lottery. During the sentencing, the judge called Sherri a manipulator and habitual liar, stating that he had no doubt she would have continued lying if she hadn't been caught. The judge told Sherri that she needed to be punished to stop others from committing similar crimes. Sherri had taken advantage of many resources, including money meant for victims, Social Security disability payments, and a GoFundMe account set up after her fake kidnapping. The judge wanted to deter others from committing similar crimes by punishing Sherri. She spoke at her sentencing hearing, expressing regret and apologizing to those who had suffered because of her actions. Sherri acknowledged her guilt, saying she was responsible for lying and bringing shame to herself and those around her. In August 2023, Sherri was released from prison and moved to a halfway house. Sherri and her husband Keith separated on the day of her arrest in March 2022. After Sherri pleaded guilty, Keith filed for divorce the next month and sought full custody of their children. The case of Laci Peterson. Laci Rocha was born on May 4, 1975 to Sharon and Dennis, but her parents divorced when she and her older brother Brent were still young. After the divorce, Laci's mother married Ron, a dairy farmer who became a father figure to her and played a significant role in her upbringing. Laci was a cheerful and outgoing person with an infectious smile and bubbly nature. She loved talking to people and was always eager to engage in conversations, which made her a natural attention seeker. She thrived in social situations and was known for her ability to light up a room with her presence. Growing up on a dairy farm, Laci developed a strong connection with nature. She spent much of her childhood exploring the outdoors and enjoying the beauty that surrounded her. One of her favorite activities was gardening with her mother, which became a source of joy and fulfillment for both of them. Laci's love for gardening would later influence her interests and career choices as an adult. Laci was a cheerleader at Thomas Downey High School, which was a great fit for her outgoing and bubbly personality. She made a strong impression on her school and became the ideal cheerleader. After graduating, Laci attended California Polytechnic University, where she studied ornamental horticulture due to her interest in plants and wildlife. Laci frequently visited a friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay. It was there that she met Scott Peterson, a co-worker of her friend. Laci was immediately attracted to Scott and was smitten. She took the initiative and gave Scott her phone number. Scott quickly reached out, and they surprisingly hit it off during their first conversation. Scott then asked Laci on their first date, a deep-sea fishing trip. However, things didn't go as planned for Laci, who ended up getting seasick. After a rocky start, Laci and Scott's relationship blossomed, and they eventually decided to live together. Before meeting Laci, Scott had aspirations to become a professional golfer, but as their relationship progressed, his focus shifted, and he chose to pursue a career in business instead. Laci graduated from Cal Poly in 1997, and Scott followed suit the next year. This milestone marked the beginning of a new era in their lives, full of promise and potential. On August 9, 1997, the couple tied the knot in Isla Valley, San Luis Obispo County. The beautiful resort setting provided a stunning backdrop for their special day. Surrounded by friends and family, they celebrated their love and solidified their commitment to each other. After getting married, Laci and Scott embarked on a new business venture, opening a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. The Shack, owned by Laci and Scott, started off slowly, but eventually attracted a steady stream of customers, with weekends being particularly busy. After several successful years, the couple decided to sell the bar in February, seeking new opportunities despite its stable income. Following the sale, they moved to Laci's hometown of Modesto, California, and purchased a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in an upscale neighborhood in October 2000. Laci took on a part-time job as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked for a European fertilizer company. Laci devoted herself to supporting Scott, taking care of the home, cooking, and cleaning. She made sure their home was always warm and inviting. In February 2002, the couple received exciting news. Laci was pregnant, and they were expecting a baby. Laci and Scott were expecting a baby boy, with a due date set for February 10, 2003. They had already chosen the name Connor for their unborn child. On December 24, 2002, Scott stated that he left their house at 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina. Scott said he left Laci at home on Christmas Eve morning with a busy day ahead of her. She was planning to watch a Martha Stewart show, clean the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and walk their dog Mackenzie at the park. However, one of their neighbors found Mackenzie wandering outside their home around 10:30 a.m. and returned the dog to their backyard. When Scott came home from fishing that afternoon, he said the house was empty, with Mackenzie in the yard, but no sign of Laci. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Scott claimed he showered and washed his dirty fishing clothes as soon as he got home. After his shower, Scott realized Laci was missing and became concerned. He called her mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron, but they hadn't heard from her all day and were worried about her safety. As the day went on and Laci remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They stressed to the police how urgent it was to find Laci, who was 7 months pregnant with their baby, Connor. The police then questioned Scott out about his whereabouts and activities on the day Laci vanished. Scott told police he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles from his home in Modesto, where he lived with his pregnant wife, Laci. However, from the start, police suspected foul play in Laci's disappearance. Initially, police didn't treat Laci's case as suspicious after Scott and his mother-in-law filed a missing person report. Laci's family defended Scott, and the couple seemed perfect, making it hard to imagine Scott harming his wife. As the investigation continued, police grew suspicious of Scott. About a month after Laci vanished, they made a stunning discovery. Scott had 2 secret affairs and a long-term relationship with Amber Fry, who contacted police on December 30th, 2002 after learning Scott was a suspect in Laci's disappearance. Amber said she met Scott on November 20th, 2002 and thought he was single. 2 weeks before Laci's disappearance, Scott told Amber that he was a widower and that the upcoming Christmas would be his first without his wife. This revelation raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if Scott had already planned to kill his pregnant wife. To gather evidence, the police asked Amber to make a recorded phone call to Scott, hoping to capture a potential confession. The police informed Laci's family about Scott's infidelities, and it was when they showed Laci's mother a photo of Scott and Amber together that she became convinced of his guilt. The search for Laci was highly comprehensive due to the involvement of the police, her loved ones, and numerous volunteers. In the first 2 days alone, more than 900 people participated in the search efforts. During a press conference, a police officer working on Laci's case raised concerns that she may not have left her house voluntarily on December 24, 2002. Laci's disappearance sparked widespread media attention with the tragic and intriguing tale of a beautiful young woman vanishing from her home on Christmas Eve, captivating the public's imagination. As the public sought answers and speculated about her disappearance, the spotlight on Laci's case intensified. When Laci Peterson vanished on December 24, 2002, a $25,000 reward was initially offered for information leading to her safe return. As the investigation yielded no leads, the reward was increased to $500,000 to boost awareness and gather more information. To keep Laci's case in the public eye, posters were prominently displayed in Modesto, California, and a friend's husband created a website to spread the word. Months later, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog in Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park stumbled upon a gruesome discovery in a marshy area. They found the decomposing body of a male infant. The next day, another person discovered the body of a pregnant woman on the east side of the bay shore, about a mile away from where the baby was found. On April 18, 2003, DNA tests confirmed that the bodies were indeed those of Laci and her unborn son, Connor. Laci and Connor were laid to rest at Burwood Cemetery. The autopsy revealed disturbing evidence. The baby had 1.5 loops of nylon tape around his neck and a significant cut on his body. Laci's autopsy showed even more brutal injuries: 2 cracked ribs, her upper torso hollowed out with internal organs removed, and she was missing her head and limbs. The medical examiner concluded that the baby died in the womb and was expelled from Laci's body after her death. Investigators from the FBI and Modesto Police Department searched the home of Scott and Laci, looking for evidence of their involvement in her disappearance. The search turned up several crucial clues, including a hair found in Scott's pliers on his fishing boat. After analyzing the hair, the FBI matched it to Laci's DNA. In addition to the home search, the FBI also thoroughly examined Scott's truck and warehouse, seeking any evidence linking him to Laci's disappearance. The FBI searched Scott's boat and found a homemade anchor that he claimed was made from a 90-pound bag of concrete, which he had used to repair his driveway. However, the prosecution believed that Scott had created multiple anchors and used 4 of them to weigh down Laci's body in San Francisco Bay. The bodies found in the bay were later identified as Laci and Connor, leading to Scott's arrest near a golf course. Notably, Scott's appearance had changed significantly. His dark brown hair was now blonde. When arrested, Scott's vehicle was found to be packed with various items, including a large sum of cash, survival gear, and camping equipment. The police also discovered 4 cell phones and 2 driver's licenses, one belonging to Scott and the other linked to his brother. This evidence suggested to the police that Scott was attempting to flee the state. Scott's father offered an alternative explanation for the driver's license found in Scott's possession. According to his father, Scott had borrowed his brother's license to get a discount at a golf course. As for why Scott's car was packed, his father claimed it was because Scott was living out of his car to avoid the media, who were camping outside his house at the time. Scott's trial began in June 2004, a year after his arrest. During the opening arguments, the prosecution presented its case to the jury, arguing that Scott had killed Laci because of his affair with Amber Frey. The prosecution highlighted Scott's suspicious behavior in the days leading up to and following Laci's disappearance, pointing out inconsistencies in his statements to the police. Scott initially told the police he was fishing on the day Laci went missing, but later told others he was golfing. The prosecution also noted that Scott asked the police if they had used cadaver dogs to search a park where Laci was supposed to walk their dog, implying that Scott was aware of the potential crime scene and trying to cover his tracks. Scott's defense team presented a strong argument in court, highlighting that Scott's history of infidelity did not necessarily prove he was guilty of murdering his wife. They reasoned that Scott would not give up his life for someone he had only dated 4 times. The defense suggested that Laci's hair might have been found in Scott's boat because she had visited the marina with him before. During the trial, 2 of Laci's relatives testified that Scott showed no emotional response when his pregnant wife went missing. New evidence emerged when a realtor testified that Scott tried to sell their home in January, a month after Laci's disappearance. Additionally, a salesman revealed that Scott traded in Laci's car after she vanished. The prosecution viewed these events as incriminating evidence against Scott. Amber Frey, Scott's mistress, took the stand and shared details of their affair. The jury listened to secret recordings of Amber's phone calls with Scott, including one where he lied about being in Paris when he was actually attending a vigil for his missing wife. During the trial, a hydrologist and tide expert testified that it was possible for Laci's body to have been dumped in the area where Scott claimed to be fishing on the day Laci went missing. However, the defense team argued that there was a lack of credible evidence directly linking Scott to the crime. Their theory was that someone had kidnapped Laci on Christmas Eve 2002, holding her captive until she gave birth to Connor, and then disposing of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. The defense attorney emphasized that there was no concrete evidence to connect Scott directly to the crime, and that other suspects could have been responsible. A significant issue arose during the trial when a juror was removed and replaced with an alternate due to misconduct. The dismissed juror had conducted unauthorized research on the case, violating legal procedures. Additionally, the foreman of the jury asked to be removed, and it was determined that his removal was necessary to ensure a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a California jury found Scott guilty of 2 murder counts: first-degree murder for killing his wife, Laci, and second-degree murder for killing their unborn son, Connor. The charge of first-degree murder for Laci's killing carried special circumstances because of the involvement of the fetus, making Scott eligible for the death penalty. After his conviction, the trial entered the penalty phase to determine his punishment. In this phase, the jury considered various factors, including Scott's prior criminal history, circumstances that aggravated the crime, and circumstances that mitigated it. The jury unanimously agreed that Scott should receive the death penalty. After reviewing the evidence, the judge upheld the jury's verdict. He concluded that Laci's murder was cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous, which led to Scott being sentenced to death. As is automatic in such cases, the sentence was appealed, and the California Supreme Court heard the case in June 2020. During the appeal, Scott's lawyers presented several arguments. They claimed that some potential jurors were unfairly dismissed, that 2 jurors were improperly allowed onto Scott's boat, and that the trial should have been moved to a different county due to biased questionnaire results, which showed that almost half of the potential jurors thought Scott was guilty before the trial even started. The state countered that there was no evidence to support the claim that any juror was unfairly dismissed, and that none of the 12 jurors who ultimately decided Scott's fate were biased. In August 2020, the United States Supreme Court upheld Scott's conviction, but overturned his death sentence. In February 2004, a judge sentenced Scott to life in prison without parole, which led to his transfer from San Quentin State Prison to Muir Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Around the same time, on April 1, 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, UVVA, into law. Laci's mother and stepfather attended the signing ceremony. Laci and Connor's law was designed to provide legal protection for unborn children in cases where their mothers were victims of violence. The legislation recognizes the unborn child as a separate legal entity from their mother, making it a crime to harm or kill the unborn child during an attack on a pregnant woman. The law acknowledges that an unborn child is a victim of violence and deserves the same rights and protections as any other human being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Chris Watts. Shannon Rusacek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in February 2012. Shannon was from Aberdeen, and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Sean and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shannon and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shannon had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shannon defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shannon was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shannon was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shannon expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shannon's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shannon worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shannon had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shannon loved her job, and it showed. As her coworker Cynthia de Rosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shannon had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband. In spring 2018, Shannon got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, She wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction, so she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Sean N was having a baby boy. Sean N and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Sean N was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Sean N took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Sean N was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Sean N expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions, and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Sean N was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Sean and their two daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Sean N was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Sean N felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Sean N felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Sean N sent a heartbreaking text to her friend explaining the situation and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches facing away from each other. Shannon suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shannon too much to do that. But Sean N was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Sean N, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Sean N that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Sean N was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shannon proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shannon was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shannon came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shannon soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shannon's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shannon opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shannon was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shannon returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shannon entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shannon's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shannon missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Sean and Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Sean would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband, Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Sean might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shanann's friends were puzzled by Chris's response because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Sean was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Sean and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shanann's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Sean and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Sean and Chris's home, the officer found Shanann's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shanann's friend Nicole. But Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shanann's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. The camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety, which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shanann's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Sean or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Sean hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shanann's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Sean might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Sean and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Shannon during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shannon, and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Sean in. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Sean and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shanann's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shanann was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shanann an emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a coworker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shanann but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shannon's body in his truck and drove to his worksite with their 2 daughters. Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. The case of Rebecca Bleefnick. Rebecca and Tim, who met at Quincy University, were the epitome of a perfect couple. Rebecca was a biology major and a tennis player, while Tim was a star football player. 2 years after graduating, the practical couple decided to tie the knot. Instead of splurging on an engagement ring and a lavish honeymoon, they chose to save their money. Although Rebecca had a genuine interest in medicine and had dreamed of becoming a doctor, she decided to pursue motherhood instead. Her dream came true when she and Tim had 3 sons. Tim was known for his charisma and ability to entertain. In February 2008, he auditioned for American Gladiators, making it to the final round. Years later, in 2019, he received an invitation from the producers of Family Feud to participate in the show with his family. Rebecca's nursing school commitments prevented her from joining Tim on the TV show Family Feud. Undeterred, Tim assembled a team of family members, including his parents and brothers. The show's format features 2 teams competing to guess the most popular responses to survey questions from 100 people. Despite being unprepared, Tim's team performed well, earning points and ranking second on the scoreboard. They went on to participate in 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000, which was divided equally among the family members. However, Tim did not share any of the winnings with his wife, Rebecca. This decision highlights the strain on Tim and Rebecca's marriage, which began when Rebecca pursued a nursing career against Tim's wishes. Tim had expressed concerns about Rebecca's well-being and ability to manage stress, but Rebecca's friends believed Tim was opposed to her independence and autonomy. Rebecca's friends noticed that she was becoming increasingly unhappy in her marriage over time. At first, her marriage to Tim was relatively happy for about 5 years, but then Tim started to become more controlling and manipulative. Despite Rebecca's hard work in her nursing studies and job, Tim didn't pull his weight at home, leaving Rebecca to handle most of the responsibilities. Rebecca realized that their marriage was struggling and wanted to fix it, so she suggested that they go to marriage counseling together. She believed that counseling could help them find solutions and improve their relationship. However, Tim refused to go despite Rebecca's efforts to save their marriage. In January 2021, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce, which caught Rebecca off guard. She had been committed to working through their issues, but Tim had already made up his mind. He moved out of their family home and into a new house across town, leaving Rebecca to pick up the pieces. Tim and Rebecca's divorce was extremely contentious. They were unable to agree on anything, and their communication broke down completely. The couple disputed several issues, including who would get custody of the children, how they would divide their property, and how much alimony one would pay the other. Things escalated to the point where Tim felt threatened and applied for a court order to protect himself from Rebecca, alleging that she was stalking and harassing him. Rebecca had a different view of the situation, accusing Tim of harassment. She shared her concerns with friends through text messages, describing incidents where Tim yelled at her, pushed her in front of their sons, and threw things. Rebecca feared Tim might do something drastic to take her children away, which alarmed her sister, who knew Rebecca's fears were valid and that she needed help to protect herself. Rebecca then filed for an order of protection against Tim, claiming he entered her home without permission and lied about their interactions. However, the judge denied both Rebecca and Tim's requests, instead ordering them to stay away from each other's homes, except during child custody exchanges. In February 2023, Tim told the police he wouldn't return a gun, calling Rebecca a derogatory name. At the time, Rebecca and Tim's 3 sons, aged 12, 10, and 5, were staying with Tim at his home, just a mile from Rebecca's residence. Their divorce was set to be finalized in just 1 week. Tim contacted Rebecca's father the next day, worried because he couldn't reach Rebecca, and she had failed to pick up the boys from school as planned. Given Rebecca's dedication as a mother, her father suspected something was seriously wrong. Concerned for Rebecca's safety, her father rushed to her house. When he arrived, he entered the house calling out to Rebecca, but received no response. He went upstairs to her bedroom, where he found a disturbing scene. Rebecca lay on her back, covered in blood and gunshot wounds. After Rebecca's father discovered her body in the bathroom, detectives and forensic experts arrived at the house. They began by carefully examining the outside of the property, searching for clues. Their investigation revealed that the suspect had probably entered the house by forcing open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. The discovery led investigators to believe that the suspect used a patio chair to gain access to the house and climb up to the roof. By retracing the suspect's likely path, they went to Rebecca's bedroom, where they found the door had been violently kicked in or broken. The state of the door suggested to investigators that the suspect had forcibly entered the room, probably in search of Rebecca. Evidence indicated that Rebecca had tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect had pursued her and caught up. Ultimately, the suspect shot Rebecca inside the bathroom. During their search of the bathroom where Rebecca's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. Upon examining Rebecca's phone, investigators found a 911 call dialed at 1:11 a.m. This led them to form a theory about the events of that night. They believed that as the suspect chased Rebecca through the house, she tried to call for help, but accidentally dialed a wrong number before she could try calling 911 again. The misdialed call at 1:11 a.m. suggested to investigators that the suspect had knocked the phone out of Rebecca's hand. They believed Rebecca was likely killed around this time. However, when police questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them remembered hearing any noise around 1:11 a.m., which raised suspicions among the investigators. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not a botched burglary, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind significant evidence. One notable discovery was a partial shoe print found near the point where the suspect entered the house. The shoe print discovered at the crime scene could be crucial in identifying the type of shoe worn by the suspect, including its make and model, as well as providing details about the size and shape of their feet. The presence of 8.9mm shell casings and small pieces of shredded plastic near Rebecca's body also provide significant leads for the investigators. Despite collecting these key pieces of evidence, the investigators were unsure how to interpret their findings. To gain more insight, they decided to send the evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. Specifically, they wanted to determine if any of Rebecca's personal belongings matched the evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation began when Rebecca's father found her lifeless body in the bathroom of her home. Upon arriving at the scene, investigators carefully examined the exterior of the house, leading them to identify how the perpetrator gained entry by prying open an upstairs window in one of the children's bedrooms. Here's what likely happened. The suspect used a patio chair to climb up to the roof and entered the house. The investigators retraced the suspect's steps and found that the bedroom door had been violently kicked in or broken, suggesting the suspect had forced their way in, probably looking for Rebecca. It seems Rebecca tried to barricade herself in the bathroom, but the suspect caught up with her. Unfortunately, the suspect shot and killed Rebecca in the bathroom. The investigators found Rebecca's phone near her body and examined it. They discovered that she had dialed 911, but mistakenly entered an extra digit, 91126, at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped the investigators piece together the events. They believe Rebecca was desperately trying to call for help as the suspect chased her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the wrong number. Before she could try calling 911 again, the suspect likely knocked the phone out of her hand. The timing of the misdialed call, at 1:11 a.m., led investigators to believe that Rebecca's murder likely occurred around that time. However, when they questioned Rebecca's neighbors, none of them reported hearing any suspicious noises, which was surprising given the fact that she had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. A thorough search of Rebecca's house revealed that her murder was not the result of a burglary gone wrong, as nothing was stolen. Despite this, the perpetrator left behind a significant amount of evidence. One crucial discovery was a partial shoe print near the point of entry, which could help identify the brand and model of the shoe, as well as the size and shape of the suspect's foot. The crime scene also yielded 8.9mm shell casings, and small pieces of shredded plastic were found scattered near Rebecca's body. After gathering all the evidence, the investigators were unsure what to make of their findings, so they decided to send the said evidence to forensic laboratories for further analysis. The detectives wanted to determine if any of the evidence found at the crime scene matched Rebecca's belongings. A neighbor had installed a security camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year earlier. The camera was directed towards the neighbor's driveway, which shared a boundary with Rebecca's home and was set to turn on and alert the neighbor whenever it detected movement. Although the camera didn't capture anything significant on the night of Rebecca's death, it did record something unusual the previous day at 1:05 a.m. The footage showed a person walking down the driveway towards the back of Rebecca's house, a potentially crucial discovery in the case. About 48 minutes after the initial sighting, the same individual was seen walking in the opposite direction. Interestingly, Rebecca's neighbor had captured a similar incident on their camera about a week prior, on February 14th. After reviewing their security footage, Rebecca's neighbors noticed a suspicious dark-clad figure lurking around her house on Valentine's Day, prompting them to alert her immediately. Upon learning about the mysterious figure, Rebecca became increasingly paranoid. Although she claimed not to have seen anyone on her property, she had heard unsettling voices in her backyard the previous night, which frightened her. Based on the security camera footage, the police expanded their search to neighboring houses to gather more evidence of the dark-clad individual. Their search led them to a house near the Quingy Bus Barn, where they found footage of a person riding a bike, dressed in dark clothing, heading towards Rebecca's house. These videos confirmed the description of the mysterious person seen in the original driveway footage, providing a clear consistency in the suspect's appearance. After analyzing the recorded times of the videos, detectives suspected that the person on the bike was the same individual seen in Rebecca's driveway footage. Although Rebecca's neighbor's security camera didn't capture footage of the mysterious person on the night of her murder, officers found footage of someone on a bike riding towards Rebecca's house just before and after the incident. This person matched the description of the individual seen lurking in Rebecca's driveway in the days leading up to her murder. While the video evidence was helpful in the investigation, its poor quality limited the information it provided. The detectives couldn't identify the person in the video due to the grainy image, making it difficult to determine their gender. However, they did notice one distinctive feature. The bike had no reflectors on its wheels. When Rebecca's sister heard that she was murdered, only one person came to mind as a suspect: Rebecca's estranged husband, Tim. Rebecca's sister, who had a first-hand account of the contentious divorce between Rebecca and Tim, shared this information with the detectives working on her sister's case. The detectives suspected Tim of murdering Rebecca, especially since her murder happened just a week before their divorce was due to be finalized. During the investigation, they made a crucial discovery. A bike with no reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on security footage, was found just a block from Tim's house. This discovery increased the suspicion surrounding Tim, leading the detectives to obtain a search warrant for his home. When the police executed the warrant, Tim cooperated fully, standing outside his home with the officers as they searched his belongings. On March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after Rebecca's murder, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder. When his mugshot was released, Rebecca's family and friends were shocked by his appearance, which was very different from the clean-cut man they had known. Tim's friends and family were shocked by his disheveled appearance, which they attributed to the emotional toll of his recent divorce. His once neat and tidy hair was now unkempt, and his clothes were messy. They speculated that the divorce had affected not only his physical appearance, but also his mental well-being. However, Tim had a surprising explanation for his changed look. He revealed that he was growing his hair out to support a charity campaign for cancer research. Despite this, a viral video clip showed Tim's appearance on Family Feud, where he made a bizarre statement about regretting his marriage, which took on a disturbing tone after he was arrested for murdering his wife. Many people believed that Tim's comment on Family Feud was a strange and unsettling prediction of what would eventually happen. They thought it showed that he had hidden feelings about his wife and was a sign that something bad was happening in their relationship. When the police looked into Tim's phone, they found that he had made a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During their investigation, they discovered that Tim had been searching for a specific type of bicycle on Facebook, a blue Schwinn bike with no reflectors on the wheels. This was an important discovery because it matched the description of a bike that was found abandoned just 1 block away from Tim's house. Despite having strong evidence against Tim, the detectives faced a significant obstacle when they arrested him. Tim was held in jail without the possibility of bail, but he requested a quick trial, which is his right under the law. Prosecutors were required to bring the matter to trial within 90 days of Tim's arrest. The prosecution faced a significant challenge in convincing a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Tim murdered Rebecca due to the absence of a confession or DNA evidence. Juries typically look for these 2 key elements in criminal cases. To prove Tim's guilt in the murder of his wife, Rebecca, the prosecution faced a significant challenge. Exactly 3 months after Rebecca's tragic murder in her home, Tim's trial began on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the prosecution presented several key pieces of evidence found at the crime scene. One notable piece of evidence was the shredded plastic fragments discovered around Rebecca's body. The prosecution argued that these fragments came from an owl's grocery bag. Further investigation revealed that similar bags were found in Tim's house. The prosecution alleged that Tim used these bags as a makeshift silencer when he shot his estranged wife multiple times. They claimed that the bags were used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, preventing it from being heard by others. The prosecution also presented DNA evidence suggesting that Tim left behind DNA while using the Aldi bags. An expert testified that it was highly likely Tim contributed to the DNA found and that his DNA could not be ruled out as a match for the DNA found under Rebecca's fingernails. The prosecution presented evidence suggesting that a crowbar found in Tim's basement might have been used to force open the window at the victim's house on the night of the murder. Although an expert testified that there were microscopic similarities between the crowbar and the window's primark, she couldn't conclusively say that the crowbar was involved. To build a stronger case, the prosecution presented records of several searches made on Tim's phone, including how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, how to clean gunpowder off your hands, and average police response time in Quinney. The prosecution's expert witness testified that she compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to those found at Tim's house during the investigation. Her analysis revealed that 27 of the casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used to kill Rebecca. When investigators searched Tim's house, they didn't find Rebecca's 9mm gun, which he had refused to return to her. Tim claimed he hadn't seen the gun in months before Rebecca's murder. During the trial, the defense had the opportunity to call witnesses, but chose not to. After the 6-day trial, the jury took 4 hours to reach a guilty verdict, and Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Despite claiming innocence and planning to appeal, Tim is behind bars, and Rebecca's family believes justice has been served. During the sentencing hearing, Rebecca's family read impact statements. One of her sisters addressed Tim, telling him how his actions affected his son's well-being. She stressed that his choices were causing his sons to suffer. Rebecca's sister vowed to keep her memory alive for her 3 sons even after her passing. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.